So here's my fear. That doesn't matter how hard you try to quarantine yourself, protect yourself, save yourself, this thing is going to come and get you. Now, a lot of my friends today are reporting that not just them, but their whole household, their parents, the family, the wife, the children, everyone is getting infected. So many people we know are getting infected. The people who never left home, they're being very careful. What's happening, in my opinion, is that without proper lockdowns and governments are assuming that people will follow these phenomenal SOPs, standard operating procedures, and be careful, keep distance and stuff like that. It doesn't happen that way. People don't do that. People are people. People need governments to enforce laws and regulations. Whereas in some countries, and the two people on this broadcast, both our countries, the governments are not doing that. As a result, more and more people are just roaming about. And I'm calling that the zombie revolution, because they're just walking around like zombies, spreading this disease, and all they're trying to do is survive. Some people have an excuse that it's economy, I don't have money, I need to work, I need to get a job, I need to get on with my life. But in the process, what they're doing is that they're leaving traces of this disease everywhere. And doesn't matter how hard I try, I am buying food, I am buying my consumables, so there is stuff coming into contact with me. And the chances, the odds of catching this infection are going higher and higher every day. And that is what's really, really got me on the edge today. Dennis.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You talk about the the different governments and what they're doing, and it's really interesting because when you look at all the governments, how they each one has tried to handle it, and it's interesting to me because it seems like it's promoted this nationalist agenda as opposed to world leaders, kind of getting on the same page and really recognizing that this is a global pandemic. And so I just kind of think that we have these summits, the G7 and these other meetings. It just seems like we should be taking and at least looking at that and how we can have a coordinated attack, because just because we shut down travel, it's still everywhere. We still have consumer goods that are being touched and so forth. So I don't know. I think that we're still getting information about how long the virus lives on different surfaces and stuff. I just think that a coordinated global attack on this it seems to be to make the most logical sense as opposed to what we're doing right now.
You've raised an interesting point. I'm going to take it in two directions. One, I'm going to say that yes, nationalistic approach versus a global approach towards a challenge. I won't even call it a disease. It's a challenge, and it's a global challenge. And instead of having a global strategy against it, what we have are not just nationalistic strategies, but within nations, there is further divide in provinces and states. In my country, the provinces head on with the federation about how to deal with it. Every day, they do these press conferences, these politicians. I would like to really use some horrible words for them. I'm just holding back. And likewise, in the United States of America, where you are, the governors and the president are really just pulling everything into many directions. And that's what's creating an even further. So it's not just nationalism versus globalism. It's also, I think it's becoming tribalism. It's becoming clan and gang. Where everyone, now, and the other direction I want to take it into, and then, let's try to spread both directions. We talked about New Zealand yesterday. And today I was just thinking what went right there. It's an island. So which means they can actually control every point of entry. Whereas if this was on mainland Europe, then they could have had like Italy. It is surrounded with land connections. So even if Italy had a strategy, people from Austria and Germany and France, it's open everywhere. And it's very difficult for them to contain themselves. Whereas New Zealand and Australia, both countries had this edge. You can shut the airports, you can shut ferry terminals, and suddenly you have minimized points of entry, and you can check and control. I think they've used that to their advantage. Dennis, let's go in both these directions. Let's first talk about the globalism, then we'll talk about New Zealand, which is really interlinked, sort of.
And it's interesting you bring that up because you can look at what's going on in the United States, and it seems as almost tribalism. I don't know about that particular I don't know about that, but what I do see is a lot of localism. And in fact, take my state of Arizona. I'm not totally sure. I want to say we have, I don't know, roughly 16 to 20 different counties, so geographical areas within my home state, and each county is handling that different. And so the interesting thing is I don't know, I'm maybe 10 kilometers, maybe 20 kilometers away from the county border. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense that one county can take and handle it one way where another one can handle it a different way. And all I know is, like, here in Arizona, and of course the more populated areas, Phoenix, Flagstaff, Tucson, the three major cities or major urban areas within Arizona. We, these are where most of the cases are. So now you have a lot of the smaller towns and communities saying, oh, no, we should be able to open up and do what we want because we're not the big boys. So it just seems like, I think that, what did we say yesterday? New Zealand had a lockdown of, 75 days?
75 days, yeah.
My question, FQ, really, because I haven't looked, you raised an interesting point, and I hadn't looked this up. What's the difference and I know that the populations are different, but the cases in Australia, are Australians acting different than the New Zealanders?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think Australia is doing pretty good. Okay. But here's an interesting point Irfan has raised. Very interesting. UK is an island too. So yes, New Zealand, Australia have the advantage of geography, but they also have the advantage of sane leadership. Whereas UK has the advantage of geography, but not the advantage of sane leadership. It was very easy for UK to lock down, people crossing the channel from Europe or the rest of the Europe, Brexit. The Calais ferry can be shut down. The Eurorail can be shut down. Incoming flights, major airports can be shut down, and all you've got is, England, Scotland, and Ireland, and and it could have been contained. But they don't have the liberty of sane leadership.
Yeah, and
so it's not just geography.
I think what this has also done, we recently did a broadcast on racism, and I'm just going to say, I think what's happened is I think racism is actually, or prejudice has actually ramped up due to COVID. And I'm not saying that COVID has affects minorities or the majority more. I'm just simply saying that we're using this. Countries are using this to close borders and to eliminate. I mean, we've been in the process of building a global world, and I think a perfect example. I'm many continents away from where you are. You're many continents away from me. My son, my son is right now, it's almost a 30 hours in the air before I could even get to him if something were to happen. So, and we talk on a very regular basis. So it's really interesting how it seems like and I understand to shut down travel, but it seems like some countries like mine is taking advantage of this to actually kind of shut the borders down. And I think that that's a really interesting when you look at nationalism, because nationalism, I don't have a problem with it. I'm all for country pride and esprit de corps. However, nationalism is one of the very first steps on the way to living in a fascist type of regime.
Well, not just that. I think the world has reached a point where all countries, all groups, fine, I'll not use the word tribe, but all groups of people, all settlements are interdependent on other settlements. Let's use the word settlement. If we remove the national borders and boundaries, let's take God's earth. Every settlement, whatever you want to call it, is interdependent on other settlements. Today, because of the globalization that we already live in, we're not in a time when everyone was growing their own food and weaving their own fabric, and no. Today we need a lot of shit.
Right.
And you were saying the other day that one of your sons builds computers and he can no longer find parts. So that's the thing. Today it is not easy. I think it's almost impossible to lock yourself down regardless of your justification or reasoning, because manufacturing, food supply, and the whole supply chain is not just within a country now. It's in everyone. I don't think there's any country which can, like Singapore. You know what? They don't have
Yeah.
enough food. They don't even have. If Malaysia shuts their water, Singapore has a water problem, and then many other countries. Everyone is now relying on somebody else for something.
Yeah.
But when I say something, it's not luxury; it's bare essentials. So how the hell can in today's world can moronic leadership try to become nationalistic or let's use the word localized? It beats me, man.
It makes no sense to me as well. It truly doesn't, because when you think about things like what one of the things like globalism has accomplished is it's opened up trade. I mean, sure, there's always going to be scuffles and stuff between countries. That's been since the beginning of time, since we've been recording history. And so, I mean, we're always going to have these little bit of scuffles and so forth. But it's better for it really promotes the economy. When we look at things like the pandemic, when we're all on the same page, we can attack it globally. I mean, I don't know. We haven't done it, so it's hard to know absolute facts. But I'm just saying, when you have a coordinated attack on anything, you always get a better outcome. So it just would make sense to me that we do this. I think human rights issues. It's interesting because we can look at protests. Those are going on all over the place based on an incident that happened right here in the United States. So it's interesting of what spreads and what gets taken as a global as a global event as opposed to a national event. And that George Floyd was a national event that happened here in the United States, but yet we see that everywhere. So
Exactly.
I don't know. I think it's I don't think that we can. I think that the sustainability of the human race, it's going to come from coming together. I mean, you look at things like measles, you look at polio. Why are these eradicated? Well, because we all came together. We have vaccines everywhere else. And I don't want to get onto the whole vaccine and what can be put into my body versus anybody else's body. That's not for today. But the reason that we have eradicated many of these health challenges, is simply because we came together as a global community. The internet brings us all together. Our economies are so closely tied to each other's that there's really no way to take and separate it at this point. So to hold on to a nationalistic agenda, I don't know, in my opinion, that decreases human rights, and it propagates other failing economies. So when human rights always decline when an economy's in the shitter. It just does. I mean, you can look back through history, and anytime a country loses its status financially, there's a lot of suffering that goes on in that part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to go beyond. I'm repeatedly going back to the same thing. I want to go beyond nationalism. It's localism. Somebody has mentioned 18th Amendment of our Constitution. It's very localized, but I'll use that as an example to build this discussion. Now, 18th Amendment in our Constitution basically says that the 4 provinces of Pakistan have autonomous rights over various things: health, education, a lot of other stuff, and the Federation has no input in that. Now, what's happening right now is they've started a debate that this pandemic, dealing with COVID-19, is a provincial issue and not a federal issue. Now there's a whole federal versus province, but I think that's absolutely stupid, because here's my point. So the federation tells a province, which belongs to another political party, saying, "Oh, you need to do this." While this province is trying to lock itself down, federal says, "No, you can't. You have to open up." Now, here's my thing. When something like this and of this magnitude, and not magnitude, of this spread happens, no one can isolate themselves. So if I take one of my provinces and if I say, "Well, it's your matter," they'll say, "Okay, fine, we're going to deal with it our way." They can shut themselves down, lock themselves completely with a wall or a barbed wire or whatever. But guess what? That province relies on the other one for food,
right?
For wheat, for agriculture, because this province is mostly arid and a desert. So they rely on this province for. Now, if this province says, "I don't give you food," but this province is they've got the seaports, they're on the warm water. Say, fine. So, and that is actually happening right now. We're running short of petrol and fuel.
I saw that.
Isn't that a freaking joke. Because you know what? It's just not moving. We're not.
You know, and that's those
So-
pictures, man. It reminded me of
Yeah.
it reminded me of the 70s here in the United States.
Yeah. And so you cannot localize this shit. And you're right. I mean, I was about to say WHO needs to kick in, but Donald Trump says this to WHO. So I think United Nations needs to kick in and declare a state of emergency and say it's not up to any country. We are going to devise a universal plan of how to deal with it. Because you know what? A lot of these countries, even New Zealand, who are thinking they have beaten this, they need to keep the Spanish flu in their sight.
Yeah.
That thing came back with a vengeance. You know, initially mankind thought that they've beaten it. But this thing came back with a vengeance and took down, I'm scared of saying it, 50 million people. And you know what? That was a time when that's now we know 50 million people. Back then, people did not know. Somebody sitting in Uganda had no idea what was happening in Ireland.
And
but
we didn't
now,
have to travel.
We didn't have to travel. Imagine today just knowing 50 million people, God forbid, have lost their lives. What kind of, screw economic, man, what kind of a socio impact that would have on humanity today if that were to
Well,
happen.
I think that we're heading there, and I think what you say about New Zealand is absolutely correct. Just in the fact that I think that they're a really good model to see, you know, because they're starting to open back up and so forth, and I think they're a really good model to watch to see what happens. I think that instead of the nationalism that I'm seeing that really bothers me is taking it like, oh no, like you know, the American government is saying, like, the CDC, we only get our information from the CDC, but there's all kinds of other information out there. You know, we get rid of the World Health Organization. I actually just heard from somebody yesterday, and they sent me this link because the World Health Organization came out and said, well, they're exploring a theory. They're exploring a theory based on that asymptomatic people are less likely to transmit the virus.
That's
symptomatic.
right.
And so what I got a couple messages from people yesterday, and it basically said, see, you ask why we're out of the World Health Organization. This is why. Look, this is the same as, this is so stupid. FQ, this is the same reason when I was in graduate school, you know, the topic that I studied was the efficacy of cannabis on mental health disorders. Now, at the time when I studied that, when I entered into that, I had to get all of my research approved. So I got my topic approved, and then 3 months into it, I got called into the dean's office, and they said, hey, we need to talk to you about your thesis and your research. I'm like, what's that? They said, you have to find American sources. What? Is this a research paper? Are we studying the topic or not? Because most of the credible research about cannabis actually comes out of Israel. So Dr. Mercolium, he has done an amazing job. He has an amazing lab. I mean, he has this down to like the micrograms. I mean, like nano ints. So my point is that we're even saying that your information isn't good. Your information isn't good, but yet here in the U.S., we'll look at some place like Pakistan and go, oh, look at these people. Look at them. They're out here running around with no masks, and it's all because they want to go to the mosques, and you know they can't stop participating in their religious ceremonies and so forth. But yet we demand that we say it's a constitutional infringement because the churches got closed. Nobody said you can't worship. Nobody said you can't believe in the God that you want to. We just simply said no mass gatherings. Well, that's violating my rights. So, I mean, I see this as, I see countries taking COVID, and I see them taking advantage of it and basically creating an opportunity to produce more prejudice.
You know, how is that even, how can, I mean, I know what you're saying, but that is not an opportunity. That is creating a disaster for yourself. That is not really an opportunity. You can create that prejudice today, but you see, the thing is, like what we've been saying, you are so interdependent on other countries that prejudice is going to just shoot yourself in the foot.
Hey, listen, I mean, you're exactly right. It's what we're doing with China right now. And again, I told you this whole thing with my son. He's not able to, and I know now because I just spoke with him yesterday. He needs only 3 parts, 3 more parts to finish his new computer build. And he's like, yeah, I'm having a really hard time finding this stuff. He goes, I'm trying to find it used. I'm trying to see if I can get an aftermarket. So, but we don't make that stuff here. And if we make it here in the United States with the divide in wealth, many people on the lower spectrum, they can't afford anything that's made in this country. So we are absolutely killing ourselves. We're absolutely killing ourselves in the name of nationalism. Again, you look it up and see. It's even on the here in the United States. We have a Holocaust museum that honors the people that lost their lives in the Holocaust, and it's meant to remember those events. On there, it talks about one of the very first things that you see when you go into that museum is the definition of fascism and when it starts to take hold. Nationalism is one of the very first steps towards fascism. It just simply is. And then you lock everybody else out. You only deal with yourselves. Listen, I mean, our economy will collapse. Do you think that, like, the U.S. is a superpower? We're a superpower. Do you think that we don't have investments and land holdings and oil holdings in other countries? And now we're going to go F you. It makes no sense at all.
Earlier you said that, I'm going to, again, go into another tangent because I'm really obsessed with humanity's dark side today. A little while ago, you said that, it was globalism and coming together that helped us beat a lot of diseases.
Yeah.
But you know what? At the same time, we did not come together to beat poverty, screw poverty, to beat hunger. And we did not really come together to beat, we came together to beat disease that could travel to us. If I'm a country, I would help you beat a disease that could come to me. I'm talking about the past, right? But course. Today, but even then, I did not help you beat any disease that is killing you. I'm perfectly all right with that. If it's going to affect me, I'll help you. If it doesn't affect me, die. That's your local problem. Likewise, if you have poverty, I can have gazillions of printed paper money. I'm not going to name any currency. Any paper money, gazillions of it, I will hoard it, sit on it, but I wouldn't care if millions of people starve in your country. Back in the 80s, we had Ethiopia, we had the famine, and I remember mid-80s, there used to be advertising all over the world that donate, and there was this whole thing, please don't show these ads while dinner time, and they used to show them at dinner time of starving children so people would dish out money. Now, how much money was needed really? Couple of $1 billion maybe? Really? Do you think the world, if they really wanted to, could not put out a couple of $1 billion like that in a snap?
Because it's never about those things.
Even back in the 80s, there was that much wealth available. But no, we created drama, advertising, donation, the world coming, charity. No one really wanted to help anybody, did they?
Well, except Bob Geldof and his group that did We Are the World, right? And Farm Aid and Live Aid and all those things. I think what it comes down to, FQ, is we really don't want to take, and it was never about taking and for, look at, when you follow the money, it was never about ending poverty. It was never about ending hunger. It was about, we're going to do this for you, but you have to do this for us. It was always a quid pro quo. Always a quid pro quo. It's never had anything to do with human rights or poverty or hunger or famine. I mean, you look at what was going on, and I had several friends that were part of the, Ethiopia and delivering food right there in Mogadishu and places like that, and they were getting shot at. So it's really interesting. And here's the other interesting thing: is you look at what happened after. It was one of the big earthquakes. It was one of the big earthquakes. It might have been Haiti. Mm-hmm. And what did they do? The United States was like, oh, we're going to come in and plant this, and we're going to redo your fields and get you up and running again. Why did they want to do that? So that the GMO manufacturers, Monsanto, could take and put their crops all over everywhere. And what did the Haitians say? No thanks. We'll let our fields come back, because they weren't willing to take and bend over for corporate America. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. I think it's really interesting that the United States is going more nationalistic, but yet at the same time, other countries are turning away from the United States because they don't like all the stipulations. Look at I mean, one simple thing. One simple thing is the reason that cannabis is illegal across the world. In most places, why was that? Because the United States declared war on drugs. And so when we did that, when we went in and you want to trade with us, you're going to sign this. And you're not going to produce cannabis. And you're not going to do this and so forth. So it was all about advancing the United States agenda. And I'm just simply saying that we're at a point in time now where I don't see how we can pull out of a global economy, or not even just a global economy. Look at other places that become dependent on others. Iran. There you go. There's a perfect example right there. But they don't like the stipulations that go along with it. So I think more and more we're going to keep seeing that, and I think what's going to happen is I think it's going to become an anti-American crusade. I think, honestly, the world's going to come together against the United States because they're sick and tired of being bullied.
I'm not sure if that time has yet come, but I'm going to go again. I'm staying on the dark side. That I was earlier talking about that. In the past, people helped each other if there was a risk of you infecting me. What's really screwed up right now is I don't want to help you even if you're going to screw me. I'm not going to help you control your disease even if I know that you're going to give it right back to me. What the hell is that? Right now, this is a pandemic which we will not be able to control until the world comes together.
I know, but
even
you
then,
talk on a local level. Like I can take and cross the street. I have to wear I don't have to wear a mask in my county, but I cross over an invisible geographical line, and now all of a sudden I have to wear a mask. See, this is what I'm saying. Instead of just making a blanket, a blanket order or standing operating procedure, or protocol, we're saying you can do it here, but not over here, and so it makes it very, very confusing. It makes it very confusing, and now we even here in my home state, we have a couple of just local jurisdictional issues to where like two counties literally fight each other. They're literally fighting each other over something that the state has said is legal, but now it's not. It's only partially legal in one county. My county's like, oh no, we follow the laws of the state. So, and I just want to go back and say, when you look at what's happened in the United States and across the, like your guys' 4 provinces, for here it's known as states' rights, and that's. I'm just going to come out and say I believe that we're at a point in time where that's only being states' rights is being used to do what we want and to not do what we don't want. So it allows Trump the ability to take and blame. Look at who he goes after. He goes after all of the states where there is a Democratic governor.
Of course.
Likewise
here,
man. As if that
they're going after provinces with opposition governments. Same shit.
See, and that's what I'm talking about. So it's not even, we can call nationalism, but now it's broken down into almost localism, and with that, now you're getting tribalism. I mean, we just keep breaking it down and breaking it down.
That's what I was saying earlier. That once you become localized, like in your state, you said now there's smaller towns which are saying, well, we don't care about the bigger cities. So that's even sub-localized, which is right. Okay, fine. You don't want to call it tribalism, but that really is, whatever the city and the town level, and it'll keep going narrower and narrower. People will start locking in their housing colonies or whatever you want to call them. People will start shutting gates on each other, and that's why I'm trying to say: is this a bloody zombie revolution? Is this the night of the living dead? Is this where people are going to just shut themselves in? You see all these movies and TV shows where you board yourself in, put cameras, see who's coming out, start shooting the zombies. That's what I'm foreseeing, because if we don't come together and face reality, God forbid, if we don't deal with this right, we could have food shortages, we could have fuel shortages, we could have all kinds of shortages. And when that happens, things like what's happening in America, I know earlier you said that the world may stop may come out and say that America is being a bully and we don't want to take it anymore. But I think it's worse than that. What is happening in the USA right now, if that is a precursor of things to come, that is way scarier than anything else, because if it becomes a global revolution, you started with George Floyd, but you know what? Now in America, I'm too far away, a few thousand miles away, but from what I'm understanding, now it's capitalism versus non-capitalism. It's become haves and have-nots. Now people are just saying, you've got too much, give it to me. So if that catches on, God forbid, things are going to get really screwed up.
Well, and I just want to say, as far as I don't know how everybody else is going to view the United States. I'm going to just come out and say I believe that the United States, my own country, I think we're being terribly irresponsible. At the end of the day, people, other countries do look at us. They look at us for leadership. They look at us for guidance. They look at us as an example. The idea of what America was based on, and when people are hungry. When people are hungry, they don't care about your Republican or Democrat. They don't care about any of that other stuff. What they care about is, I'm hungry, my kids are hungry. So I think that the United States actually has a responsibility. The same as, I've heard this said about President Trump, which is that, he has freedom of speech like everybody else. But when you're in positions of power, like, your words matter. Your words matter more than what other people's do. Your example matters more. That's why you're in that position. You were in that position because you wanted to be a fucking rock star in the first place. So now you're there, and now what you do is you give these terrible examples to the rest of the world. And I think that, the United States, we can look around here. I look at other countries. I look at Canada. I look at listen, I don't know that Sweden necessarily did it correctly, but they're holding themselves accountable. Instead of blaming, the only ones I hear calling it the China virus is the United States. Not even the United States, only Donald Trump and his followers. Well, true.
You can't blame the whole population or country.
No, but you think about how the mind works. You think about how the mind works, and this is what it's these generalizations that we make because it helps us to make sense of things. So I think at some point, we all need to take and come together as a world. The United Nations, I think, is a perfect example, but the way that's going, we'll just pull out of that too. So
well, Irfan made a comment earlier that I think you guys have shown the finger to UNESCO, right?
United Nations, I believe so, yeah. I mean, we've always been at odds because we want to be in charge. We want everybody to just bend the knee to us.
Yeah. Kiss the ring, man. Okay, Irfan has made two very interesting comments. He said, great point about holding on to your money. An American Nobel Prize winner, when an economist said, money has no intrinsic value and only has value when you give it away. And he goes on to say, so money only has value for the microsecond when it is exchanged for a product or service, and as soon as the transaction is over, the money loses value again. So money, what he's trying to say is that money is of value only while it is moving. Once you hoard it, it becomes useless. It becomes a number. It has no intrinsic value.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's an interesting concept. Thank you, Irfan. I appreciate that insight. I hadn't thought about that, so thank you for challenging my thinking.
So here's another one. The most scary thing is imagine a man whose kids are starving and he sees a Mercedes drive by. Can you imagine this man while starving kids grabs a weapon and takes out his frustration on this Mercedes drive by? Okay, I've said this repeatedly. Pakistan is one of those nations which wastes a lot of food. You go to a restaurant, you pay, say, upwards of, $30 US for a meal, and then you leave half the food on the plate. When it goes back into the kitchen or the washing room, the man who has to throw this food into garbage makes, maybe $100 a month, and he probably has starving kids and family back home, and he's throwing that food away. What kind of crap are we doing? Another example I've given repeatedly, Pakistan also has these, rich people parties where there's a lot of dancing and boozing and whatever. And those parties have always terrified me because all these rich people in Pakistan, like Philippines, you have a lot of private security and also a lot of official security where police gives you support, and so you make that man stand outside whose salary is probably $100 a month, and he's carrying an AK-47 to protect you, while he knows inside you're throwing away booze for thousands of dollars.
Right.
So when you have that kind of disparity, you have a severe problem brewing under the cover. And this is the point Irfan is making, that when even the poor have basic rights, like countries like Finland. All right, it's a beautiful example. Like Sweden, like Norway, Denmark. These are countries where it doesn't matter what your job is, you get a decent salary. And even if you are very highly qualified, if you're a doctor or a surgeon, and you're a school teacher, janitor, your prosperity level is pretty much balanced out. Fine, somebody may be making more, somebody making less, but so there are no deep-rooted resentments. But in countries like mine, or the unindustrialized world, that disparity is very, very scary. Where one example is Mukesh Ambani's house. You familiar with that?
I'm not.
Oh, dude, this is now this house is worth, I think, $2 billion.
Okay.
Right? It's in the center of Bombay. It's called Antilia, and it's actually built. All around it is slum.
Okay.
All right, and I'm trying to find the right picture. It's a 60-story house with helipads, gyms. There's a staff of 300 or 400 people which
Really?
runs
Wow.
this house. And Mumbai, the city where this is pretty much a slum. The city reeks of shit and piss because there are people living on the streets,
Okay.
and they use the whole city as a toilet. I have never been there, but from what I understand, it is a city drowned in mafia and gangs and corruption and extreme poverty. While he lives in this house, which sticks out like a needle
Right.
in the middle of that slum. Now that is, I think that is where the problem, we've completely gone off topic, but that is the problem. And that problem, I feel, under the umbrella of COVID-19, that brewing lava is now finding fissures on the skin and trying to come out. And that's what I think is happening in the USA right now.
I agree, and I think it comes down to it's not just the haves and the have-nots. It's that I want it all. I don't want to have it. I want to have it all. I mean, it's kind of like that saying, and I joke around like this, which is that people are like, oh, why do you get up so early? It's like, well, it's not just because the early bird gets the worm. I mean, if I'm going to get up early, I don't want one worm. I want all them motherfuckers, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose. So that's the whole point. So it's really just about I think that the nationalism really is about we want it all and we want everybody else to bend the knee to us. When we break it down into localism, we're really saying that, hey, well, no, my people elected me, so I don't have to listen to you. But I'm not going to listen to you, but I want your help. Right? And then you have the other side, which is that, well, the federal government isn't here for us. It's not for this or that. I mean, we have cases and instances of the federal government here in the United States going to states. So it was said, hey, states, you need to take and provide the ventilators. You need to take and provide the masks. That's your responsibility because of states' rights. And then what happens? The federal government goes and confiscates it. It. Jared Kushner came straight out and said, Trump's his son-in-law came straight out and said those are ours. Those ventilators, those supplies, those are ours. That's not for everybody else. They need to provide that on their own. But you took it. Yeah. You literally stole it. So I think that this is what it's done. And again, we've already talked about prejudice enough, but I think that this goes towards more of these humanitarian injustices. So COVID has allowed countries that wanted to ramp that up, it's created an opportunity for them to tighten in, become more nationalistic, and say F you to everybody else, and we just point fingers and blame. And think about it, man. So you were part of the mainstream media for a long time. When you tell somebody over and over and over and over what to think, guess what? They think it.
Absolutely. No,
That's the whole point.
Have to go, in today's day, you don't even have to go over and over. You just create a fake thing and just circulate it, and boom, it's done. I mean, it's that bloody simple. You know,
Absolutely.
The Kushner example that you gave, man, that brings me to another dark side of humanity. It's not just localism. It's gangs of people in influence and power who at this time of crisis will just say, I'm going to live and you're going to die. So I'm going to take the last bit of resource, take it away so in case I get infected, I can protect myself while you, dude, you know what, you're up the creek with no paddles.
Sure.
And a hole in your bloody boat. Now the thing is, more we talk about this tonight, humanity's dark side is really coming out. It's what the fuck?
Well, we're eating our own, and to the point about zombies, I think that's really what we're seeing. Is we're seeing people, like we're seeing groups and factions, governments and so forth. They're eating their own. I mean, we're really not having a better example of this. And so, it's interesting because like here in the U.S., for so long, it was like, oh, look at all the Latin Americans that are trying to get into the U.S. Look at all of the brown people that are trying to get into the U.S. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we closed the borders. But you've been wanting to close the borders. How convenient. So I think it's just given an opportunity. I think it's given governments an opportunity. I think it's given groups within certain countries. I think it's given them a stronghold, or it's given them at least a bit of footing to take and ramp up these nationalistic policies, even localistic policies. At some point, though, in order for us to all succeed, those of us in the middle that I keep telling, rise up middle, it really comes down to we're going to have to take and get on the same page. Listen, I mean, FQ, I know we might differ on this a little bit. I think there's a bunch of smart people, really, really brilliant, intelligent people across all corners of the globe and in the middle. Let's get these people together and let's come up with some solutions for this. I just don't think that this is as hard as we're trying to make it. I don't think it's all the media. I think it's just a small faction of people that take and make this into a much bigger deal than what it is, but it's all very self-serving, and it's all based on a narrative and an agenda that they're trying to push anyway. So it's just all very convenient.
It's not just globalized, not just nationalized, not just localized. I think it's just gangized. Any gang who's got the more firepower is just taking over resource, whatever's left of it. So God help us. Couple of comments here. Rafi says, that's insane to have 300-400 stars. No, they're creating jobs, 400 people. That's not my point. It's their money. It's their money. How they spend is their business. My point was that while you have so much desperation around you, that disparity, I'm not blaming why you have so much money. He has money. I'm a capitalist. He has money. That's good for him. But when you become insensitive in how you spend that money, then it becomes a problem. In Scandinavian countries, you don't see that. IKEA's chairman, the guy with money, he drives an old car and he travels economy. He does not flaunt his money. There's a documentary about wealthy people on Netflix. I'm not sure what it's called. And they look at Germany, how wealth is. And they were interviewing one of the German billionaires. And he made a very interesting point that in Germany, if you show your wealth, people don't like it. So you cannot exaggerate your wealth. You have to live and at a certain level, because if you start flaunting your wealth, the society shuns you. And you will see a lot of pictures of the chancellor. She has meetings in her small apartment where she makes tea herself and serves to the guests. So, the society does not allow them to have that extravagance. It is perfectly all right to have money to buy luxury and comfort. I don't have a problem with them. She said, I have a Kurt Geiger boot. Why not? You've made your money, you've got to enjoy it. Just make sure that you're not walking on somebody's grave wearing that boot. That's where my fear is. The insensitivity that we have. Dennis.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree that it just is a matter of, it's kind of, I guess I look at it like this. It's real simple to me, more of a back to the basics approach, which is that if society has a certain standard and you want to do something, you want to deviate too much from that, you end up calling it an airstrike on yourself. And I see this a lot just in business and so forth. And then people call the airstrike in on themselves and then they complain about getting bombed. It's like, but that's what you just did. So if you don't want to take the criticism, then I'm not saying to live within your. I don't care how people live. I mean that they can do whatever they want with the money that they've earned. I'm very much a live and let live kind of a person. It's just simply that if you don't want the negative backlash from it, then tone it down. You call an airstrike in on yourself, then expect to get bombed. I mean, that's just the way it is, and you have to kind of accept that with it. One of the things, I did see something here that I wanted to address from Irfan. Local, even small towns in the U.S. have their own newspapers and TV channels which pump only local news. Yes, I think that this is true to a point, and all I'm going to say to that, Irfan, is that when you look at, there have been several, exposés, people that have kind of called out the mainstream media. And what you can see is that there's, I want to say here in the United States, there's like three major communication companies. And when you look at all of the local stations that are local subsidiaries that are owned by the parent company, like you can see they script it, and you can see the exact same narrative over across like 300 different news channels, all under the premise of being local news. So I'm getting local news, but it's all I'm getting local news, but they're still creating a national agenda. So I think that it just depends on what you're watching, and that's why I think shows like this are so much more important than mainstream media. It might not necessarily be any more accurate, but you're certainly going to get a whole lot less bullshit than you do, and you're not going to get the corporations trying to sway things. Like FQ and I, we don't have advertising. I don't have advertising dollars from corporate anybody that's trying to sway my opinion or to promote a certain product. So I think that matters as well. There was one other one I wanted to. Go ahead.
Local news will give you local news, which is just local news, but the overall agenda remains the same. I'm going to go even further, and I know for a fact, for various reasons, maybe by the virtue of what I do, all global leaders pretty much are in the same business, and that's in the business of making money for themselves. The Iraqi oil used to be shipped on ships owned by another country's prime minister, and that oil was handled by people or companies owned by another country's king or ruler. And it's all a known fact now. George Bush Sr. had business interests in other countries where they were fighting mutual wars, and you know what?
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. You look at the Medici, and you look at the old sultanates, and you look at the old Qing Empire, and you look at the Mongols, and you look at all dynasties which have passed. It was about business. It were the personal fiefdoms, and they were out there to do personal business. I think Dubai is a phenomenal example where it's really pretty much is owned by one man. The city is his personal business. The airline, the building, the transport, the taxi, it's owned by one man. It's his business. Now, he's made that country a phenomenal machine, which makes him a lot more money. But it is a personal business. Come out and own it. It is perfectly all right for Donald Trump or George Bush or Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi or the Saudi king or the Dubai. It's all right, man. Say the names have changed. Now we call it democracy, but it's still personal businesses. We take turns. We come into power to propagate and become wealthier and do our businesses. And their businesses are really at a level you and I cannot even begin to bloody understand.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes you actually have to take and go a couple of levels deeper. I think you do. I think you have to go a couple levels deeper on some of this, simply because you look at the United States and our involvement in Iraq. That's laterally known as Dick Cheney's war. And why is that? Because Dick Cheney, he it was mainly his war. And why is that? Well, he owned Halliburton. So, I mean, it was all beneficial. And so George Bush ends up being like the fall guy for this, and he takes a lot of hits for it. But it was Dick Cheney that was calling the shots. I mean, anybody that understands, the American politics understands at least that part of it. So I think sometimes we have to go a little bit lower. And I did want to show this because I think this is great. Umar, thank you. Yeah, Gangster's Paradise. You absolutely bet. FQ and I are big fans of music. And so, go Coolio. Love it.
I'm going to throw this example on the screen. Li Ka-shing is this guy in Hong Kong. And it's said that every dollar that you spend in Hong Kong, he makes 45 cents on it.
Wow. Brilliant.
Every dollar. Because he owns the taxis. He owns the restaurants, he owns the buildings, he owns fucking everything. He's got money in everything. And you just cannot escape giving him money. Likewise in Dubai, every dollar or dirham you spend, I think about 60, 70 cents of it is going to Sheikh Mohammed. Which I have no problem with, as long as you're doing good for your people. Right. I don't mind if America says this is a principality where we take turns on who is on top, and while the 4 years or 8 years this person's there, he's going to treat it like a business and he's going to get a take from the country's income. I'm okay with that as long as the country makes money. Yeah. I'm all right with somebody coming in Pakistan and saying, you know what, we're no longer a democracy, we are a kingdom, but we take turns at being kings. No inheritance, nothing. You take turns. Malaysia is not a kingdom, but they have an interesting. They've got all these sultans. Malaysia is phenomenal. They got these sultans. They've got their own, sultanates, and they come together and they take turns at being the king.
Interesting.
It's a rotation system. And one becomes the king. And these families, they actually pretty much own all the land in their province.
Okay.
So in Malaysia, you could be on a street where on the right-hand side the shops are closed, on the left they open, because on the right-hand side the Sultan's, it's his birthday. So in his fiefdom, it's a holiday.
Interesting.
I'm all right with it. Though they have a democratic system, they still have a democratic government, but I'm okay with that. Just stop screwing the world.
That's it, and that's kind of where I come from as well. Is like it's at some point we have to look at human rights and understand that we're all part of the global world. And it's really interesting to me that in our religions, we say in some form, depending upon your religion, in some form we say, that we're all God's children, right? I mean, you are, unless if you meet our qualifications. I mean, we always end up seeming to have to qualify that. We talk about that, but I don't think that's something that we really believe in. Because we certainly don't act like it. It's just something kind of cool to say. Like, we might as well just put that on an inspirational quote and put it out there on Facebook. I mean, that's just kind of, I mean, it really
doesn't
do
nothing.
We've done nothing. I've promoted something good. So I think that there's a lot of a lot of improvement that we can do, and I think that where the real improvement is going to come from. I'm gonna just say, my whole platform is let's take everything back to the basics. Let's start let's just take it, be nice to our neighbor. Let's maybe say hello to our neighbor. Maybe introduce yourself to somebody in your neighborhood you don't know. Get to know each other. When we know each other locally, now we can act more, provincially, state-wise. We can act more globally. But it all starts from how we treat each other right here at home, and how, again. FQ, we don't agree on everything. We have differences of opinion. We've never met in person physically, and yet we have massive amounts of love for one another. So I just met Faisa yesterday from South Africa, somebody, a child of apartheid, who had very interesting, viewpoints on the world and prejudice and racism in particular. I love her to death. And never met her. The chances of me going to South Africa anytime soon, anyway, that's pretty rare, right? I mean, that's probably not going to happen for a while.
Yeah.
And so it's learning how to take and accept one another for who we are.
Bro, in today's world, with this bloody video thing going on, you know what? Traveling, I used to love traveling. But ever since, for the past 2 years, my wanderlust is gone. Because I'm I've seen the basics. I've pretty much seen a lot of the world, things I want to see. Now, really, I was just watching some TV show with Bina yesterday, and they were showing Florence, and she said, "Well, you've been there?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've been there. I've stood in this place." And she said, "Well, you want to go back?" I said, "Who the hell's going to go to Italy?" Right? So now with all this video and connection, there's a brand new world has opened up where we can all reach out to each other, become friends, and connect. On that note, please go to DennisTyrrell.com and go to his Facebook page and YouTube channel and subscribe. He does his show Back to Basics. Dennis, was that 6:30 p.m. U.S. Pacific time, Mountain time, right?
We've switched to 7 p.m. So
7
it would be
p.m.
7 a.m. there in Pakistan.
Pakistan time.
Yep.
And go to my website, festkreation.com. You can find links to my YouTube and Facebook everywhere. Please subscribe. And on last note, I just discovered yesterday, when people join in on a live stream on Facebook, you cannot rewind. You just join where you join, and you have no idea what we've been saying. So you just kind of stuck until the thing ends, and then you can watch it from the beginning. Whereas I still have to check, but I'm quite sure that YouTube, you can actually rewind while it is live. So please, you might want to go to my YouTube, which is youtube.com/Faisal Qureshi. You go to my website, you'll find the link, subscribe to that, so you can watch the stream there. And over there, you can, whenever you join in, you can rewind and watch this. On that note, thank you very much and good night.
Thanks so much. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Take care.